Welcome to the latest episode of On the Rocks, the podcast that explores the intersection of mining technology and global issues. In this special episode, we're bringing you a replay of our recent live stream where we introduced the Bedrock Alliance, a groundbreaking initiative uniting the mining industry to address global humanitarian crisis, with an immediate focus on the famine in Sudan. Join host Emily King as she discusses this urgent mission with Bram Govaerts from CIMMYT and Loren Stoddard from USAID. Let's dig in.
And with that, I guess first I just wanted to introduce you two, Loren and Bram. Loren, would you like to start and just introduce yourself for a minute?
Sure. Loren Stoddard. I'm the Director of General Development for USAID Sudan, actually based in Cairo because the embassy's not open right now. So we have representatives in Kenya and Cairo and also Uganda as part of our USAID mission there. So that's my base is in Cairo, and I manage a portfolio of about $120 million in projects, which cover things like health programs, water and sanitation programs, and also, most importantly, agriculture programs, which is critical right now.
And just as a personal note, Loren and I have known each other for a long time and go back to working mining issues in Afghanistan. So if any of
I'll just say that I the conflict in Sudan is a very sad one, a rough one. I've spent many of my years working in conflict areas in Afghanistan, Colombia, and Iraq, places like this. And unfortunately, the themes are all too common. But it's been a part of my lot in life to work in areas that are often subject to conflict. And so Sudan has become kind of the latest example of that, a tough place to work.
Absolutely. And Bram, with that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Bram Govaerts. I'm the Director General of CIMMYT. CIMMYT is the international center that's responsible for maize and wheat production globally. So 50% of the corn grown in the developing world and 70% of the wheat grown globally comes from CIMMYT's efforts together with our partners. But more than that, we're really looking at cereal systems, that agri-food systems that can provide nutrition and resilience globally. So we have activities in over 80 countries, and so many of that focused really on Latin America, Africa, and South Asia. And so with a whole team and with a whole team of partners, always working on making sure that the bread, which is made of wheat, or the tortillas, or the ugale, which is made of maize, can go to the tables of the families globally.
Such a fascinating mission on both your parts. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for folks as to how this webinar got put together, because it might sound like a strange topic for Prospector to be hosting and for a mining AI company to be encouraging folks to help with the crisis in Sudan. And really it's all about relationships, right? And the interconnectedness of the world. Loren and I were catching up and talking about things as friends and what are you working on? What are we doing? Those types of topics. And when he was explaining to me some of the work that needs to be done in Sudan, he was like, and Loren, I don't want to speak for you, but he was kind of like, how can we get the mining industry involved in these topics? Yeah. Right. And so that led to a fascinating conversation where we were talking about the fact that Sudan is not a country that's known for large mining companies being present. There's not a direct kind of tie in with corporate social responsibility or ESG efforts from the majors. So you don't have a company that's really incentivized to help with some of these issues because they've got a mining license there, right? It's a country where the industry really needs to get involved because it's the right thing to do. And because we're people and we're humans and we're all connected globally. And as part of that conversation, I was like, Loren, we've been doing some cool work with Prospector data with a group called CIMMYT that people wouldn't really think about, trying to look at where companies are developing mining projects and how can they develop agriculture in a sustainable way around. And he's like, wait, Bram? I'm like, yeah, he's been on the podcast. And he's like, that's who we're working with in Sudan. So
it was amazing.
It was anyway. Yeah, we were like mind blown. We were like sending messages to all three of us at the same time, like, hey, we got to get on and talk about this, right? Because how do these three things really connect? So just wanted to flesh that out for everybody and make that tie. So even when talking about a terrible crisis that's having huge negative impact on millions of people, there are ways that our personal relationships and the things that we're doing in other ways can help address this. And with that, Loren, I wondered if you could just give an overview for people on what is going on in Sudan and what has led to this crisis. People might have seen the headlines and the news, but let's just be honest, the world is so crazy right now and there's so much going on. I think it's probably gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit, and folks may not be 100% aware.
No, I appreciate that. Actually, we sometimes call Sudan right now the forgotten war. That's actually kind of the problem. There are so many big crises going on in the world that people sort of forget that actually Sudan has the biggest crisis. This is the biggest humanitarian and food security crisis right now on the planet. And it's probably the biggest crisis that we've had for a few decades. It's that big. And I think it's hard to remember that. I remember, some of you may remember, We Are the World days. You know, we were helping Ethiopia feed itself in the 80s. And everything that was involved there. This is bigger than that. This is bigger than that by times 2 or 3 or 4 people times in terms of the number of people affected. So it's a big crisis. It's affecting a lot of people. Sudan's a country of 50 million people. So in some ways bigger than what's even happened in Somalia or Libya as comparison. So back in April 15th of 2023, a war broke out between the army and a militia group called Rapid Security Forces. And these two were built up over years. They're both large. The Sudanese military is a large military with planes and modern technology. And then the RSF group is very large, well, too, maybe 60 or 70,000 fighters. Big group broke out and they started fighting over the country. And right now the RSF has taken over most of Western Sudan. The SAF is really involved in Eastern Sudan. And this has disrupted food systems. So you have, back in the 90s with CIMMYT and our partners there, Norman Borlaug, I couldn't believe this. The founder of CIMMYT in Mexico City spent years going to Sudan to get their food systems up and running. So some of the wheat grown in Sudan has come from these early food security systems and out of the green revolutions. And there was actually seed banks in Sudan that were destroyed that are backed up by the seed bank with CIMMYT. So there's definitely this relationship, and it's an old food relationship between Mexico and Sudan in that sense. So there's kind of an interesting connection. But sadly, more than half the population is now food insecure. I mean, hungry. We've got something like 800,000 people that are at the worst stage, stage 5, according to the IPC numbers, of sort of imminent starvation, famine. And then we've got another 8-9 million that are kind of at emergency levels. And so out of a population of 50 million, half are what we call food insecure. But out of that, maybe 8 or 10 million are facing almost immediate hunger issues. Maybe they're going to starve to death in the near term. So I think, in the next 6-8 months, we could lose 500,000 or 1 million people to starvation. So this is sort of horrible. It's a modern world. We don't think about people just running out of food and going hungry, when in other parts of the world there's so much. But right now we have a significant food crisis. Some people have said, well, what can we do? Throw their hands up. There's a conflict. There's nothing you can do. On the other hand, we say, well, we have to do something. People have to eat every day, whether there's a war or no war. And the people that suffer the most are the most vulnerable, right? We had a children's conference recently that Bram came to in Nairobi, that was hosted with Save the Children and UNICEF. We look at maybe 3 million children are displaced. There's 10 million people displaced overall. That conference raised about $100 million between the U.S. and the Germans and some private church groups and others to kind of deal with food insecurity. But we've got to plant more food, and that's why it's really important that CIMMYT's involved, because we've looked at some of the numbers. It might be 1 to 3, and this is a little bit. Do you give people wheat or sorghum or corn, or do you help them plant it again? And these food systems have been disrupted. They've been destroyed in some way. So Sudan could be one of the most food productive countries in the world. It's just this conflict has really wrecked things a little bit. And we can't quit despite the conflict. We don't know when the conflict's going to end. It's going to go for a while, but that means that we have to work through the conflict. And so we talked in Mexico with Bram a little bit about the concept of conflict-resistant programming, conflict-resistant agriculture. So we're looking at things like solarizing, water pumping, and these kinds of things. How do you make a system that survives through a conflict and helps people eat? If things go bad, I just have to mention this. It's a humanitarian issue. We all care about people starving to death. That's a horrible thing. It's also a strategic issue. We're right next to Egypt. We're right next to the Red Sea. When you have a collapse in Sudan, you affect the whole region, and that affects the whole world. And you've already got lots and lots of Sudanese that are running to Italy and running to parts of Europe and things like this. So the problems in Sudan don't stay in Sudan. They'll go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of a challenge that we're going to have to deal with across the board. And this is for a few years as this conflict makes its way.
Thank you, Loren. Yeah, I mean, it's such a crisis on a massive scale. I think sometimes it's hard for people to even
Yes.
conceptualize that many million people, right, at this stage. And I know part of what I was fascinated by when you and I first spoke about it is this focus on resilience, right? And there is an immediate response. There's literally like delivery of food to people, but then there's how to recreate more resilience in these conflict areas.
Right.
And Bram, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what CIMMYT's doing from that perspective of this resilient agriculture that will hopefully create food supplies, locally for folks as this continues.
And I was actually saying, it brings me back to the other seminar we had together. And back then it was another conflict. It was the Ukraine war, where we realized how connected the world is. And so actually CIMMYT as being responsible for wheat, of course, that was a big wake-up call for the whole community of saying that the wheat supply system is really, really fragile. And it was in that context that not only for wheat, but same for maize, for maize corn, for other cereals. So actually we were working in Sudan with a coalition of NGOs to rewire, let's say, the food production system. And that happened when the war, and then the war broke out. So actually the challenge for us was, can we pivot and can we activate that network? And that network is comprised of international organizations like CIMMYT, who's catalyzing the network, who's also injecting the network with knowledge, with new varieties, with new farm practices. But we also have, for example, CIP, which is the International Potato Center, or we have ICRISAT, International Center for International Crops, ILRI, which is the International Center for Livestock. So they bring a lot of knowledge, they bring a lot of technology, a lot of innovation. And then, of course, we have last mile delivery partners, the INGOs like Mercy Corp, Samaritan Purse is a local NGO, but also Vétérinaires Sans Frontières or Vets Without Borders, the World Vegetable Center, all coming together with some local NGOs. ADRA is an example of that, or Near East Foundation. So this is actually becoming now the only functional, let's say, network that goes from science, innovation, data-driven, what you're also known for, Emily, and your company is known for, data-driven decision-making, all the way down to underground, very concretely working with farming communities. So we have reached 335,000 farming communities, of which 48% female, 49% youth in different states. And we're really showing them or helping them, supporting them to grow sorghum, groundnut, vegetables, millets, livestock, because you can try to get that food in, but there's, of course, huge discussions on how efficient that immediate food can come in. But you can also try to produce that food locally. And as Loren was saying, there's a lot of internal migration happening. So you have a lot of internally displaced people who are now concentrating in areas where maybe before there was not such a big demand for food. But but those people are not there because it makes sense from a urban or from it now makes sense with very different parameters, which is it's a safe place to be. So people concentrate, markets are shifting. So we're trying to respond and help also farmers to respond to those markets. So it is really about direct agricultural investment, while we also facilitate, of course, the delivery of aid. And some of that local production will become part of the aid delivery channels, right? It will be picked up by World Food Program. It will use some of the UNICEF programs. Will use those locally produced food. That locally produced food, of course, at the same time will increase and will prepare for resilience also for the future. And there's very encouraging stories of women-led, female-headed household efforts that CIMMYT and the team has been supporting. And so, for example, one of the big elements is the vaccine. So vaccinating many of livestock so that they can survive instead of the livestock dying, and can actually produce those local products. But also hectares and hectares. Just recently, very beautiful pictures from the new Halfa scheme, which was not a very productive area. Now over 7,500 hectares of sorghum is coming up as we speak. It is growing there as thanks to those interventions. And the same, over 5,800 hectares of groundnut were planted in that same scheme and can be harvested very, very soon, and then go into those those food supply change, those new markets. But of course, we want and can and have to do much more, and I think that's what this conversation is about.
Yeah, because I think, as we've chatted, the three of us before this call, in a way, so much of agriculture and food supply is tied to the mining industry, right? It's not something that people think about, but phosphate and fertilizer is directly tied to mining companies and the products that they deliver and put into our kind of supply chain. But also for any of you out there that work in like the remote sensing or the geophysics space, like there's such capacity to do water exploration or water management assistance with the same tools that we use in mineral exploration, right? And I think that's just something where I don't know if either of you have any other ideas on kind of how this connects in.
So sadly, mining is the center of the conflict. And it's kind of an ironic thing, Emily. The biggest export of Sudan is gold. Gold mining has thousands of years of history. It's 16th or 17th in terms of gold exports. A lot of this gold is going to different places, and there's kind of a gold tracking, gold money laundering challenge there, as well as gold gets out. So gold is definitely central to this issue. There's a lot of other minerals that are available in Sudan that could be mined if the country was sort of peaceful and stable. But the scale of the destruction is massive. I think the Khartoum was a city of 8 or 9 million people. It's been essentially burned. So you lost the whole city, and those people have moved now. And now you're trying to create food for that level of people to kind of get back into the game and survive essentially this horrible conflict we're having to run. So mining is central to the conflict, sadly, in a sad sense. And then I think back to your question was, how do we get mining companies interested in the humanitarian side? I mean, we're looking at saving the lives of millions of people. With the partnership that Bram mentioned, all the different CRS, these things are heroes. They're implementing agricultural programs with active fighting going on, all around. And it goes back to the 90s and 80s, in Central America, in some places where fighting's happening on one block and we're doing development on another block, and it's kind of this sort of thing as you're trying to keep people alive in the middle of this conflict. So we need more help. I think there's to say we can't do anything is wrong. Our hands aren't tied. We're actually doing a lot. The United States government's committed $1.4 billion to this effort, but then we're seeing all the private sector commitments as well. We know that the mining industry at large is very generous. I think $1 billion a year is donated to philanthropic causes from the mining industry across the board. So I think there's a long-term interest in mining in Sudan, but I think at the short term, there's this humanitarian challenge. And memories are long in Sudan. When you do something in Sudan, people remember the 80s, they remember the 90s, they remember what happened with Norman Borlaug and CIMMYT. So people remember these kinds of things. And so if a mining company steps up and wants to be engaged with CIMMYT or some of these other partners, the Sudanese are going to remember this, and they're going to remember this for decades to come, and that'll make a big difference long term. So I think there's a definite interest for mining companies to want to engage at humanitarian level. And then on the agriculture side, absolutely, the inputs coming out of Sudan will be critical for agriculture worldwide. So this is an area that we're going to have to fight through. We're going to have to work through it. You can't wait till it's over.
Yeah, just maybe to add quickly, I do think we need to give a shout out to the people on the ground. So those working with the networks, so they're on the ground, they're working with farmers. And like Loren was saying, it's a conflict, it's a moving conflict, but at the same time, close by, farmers are actually farming and are actually producing food in the midst of that conflict, supported by this network. And as for the mining industry, I do think that the fertilizer connection is extremely important to realize, that actually no agriculture without fertilizer, right? That's what plants basically. So I think that fertilizer connection is extremely important. But I also think there's a lot of knowledge in the mining industry that actually can be used for the development of water schemes for irrigation of food crops, or in order to use as this decision-making tools where we are, how to develop those agricultural schemes. So I also think there's a huge knowledge contribution that can be done, data sets that can be shared to actually equip the network that is on the ground to be more effective in what they're delivering. So I also want to highlight that we should have also conversations on that knowledge unlocking from the industry towards what's happening on the ground.
No, in fact, our humanitarian partners are opening up water points all the time. I think UNICEF's done 500 additional water points in the last few years, and solarizing those water points, where to put the water points, and whether it's for humanitarian reasons, whether it's for irrigation, water is critical. It's very, water is a major issue wherever you go in Sudan, whether you're near the Nile or not. The Jazeera irrigation scheme is famous. It's one of the largest irrigation schemes in the world. Again, all about water management. So definitely interested in data sets and your work with USGS and I think, as you said, Emily, water in Sudan is in somewhat well known, but we've got to understand it now in terms of these new water points and where they're going in. I think we're looking at more water points. As the IDPs have moved around, you need to drop in new wells. We actually spent, sadly, a lot of money on things like trucking water. When you're trucking water around, this is sort of the worst use of humanitarian resources. And so you've got to dig in, dig wells where you can. And this is kind of the idea. But absolutely, we need support.
Well, and that's where, Go ahead, Bram.
No, I was going to say, but the good news is there is a network on the ground that can actually receive, because many times in those conflict situations, you don't have a receiving action element. So, but there is that network on the ground that can receive the databases, that can receive the support, and can turn it into action immediately. So, I think there's hope that can be activated and used towards results.
I'll say I'm struck by the fact that something like 70% of all U.S. households make donations, philanthropic donations. Easily, many of the people online have already donated to organizations that are working in Sudan. Many of you may have donated already to Save the Children or Mercy Corps or UNICEF or these other kinds of organizations. They're the ones that are actually implementing these programs on the ground despite the conflict. And so I think the idea of supporting from a philanthropic point of view is there. It needs to expand. And again, we're going to see the pictures coming from severe hunger in the next 6 months. And it's really one of those questions of, do you want to be on the right side of supporting this effort as it goes forward? The good news, as you said, CIMMYT, is there are things to be done. It's not just tossing your hands up and saying there's a war, there's nothing to be done.
Right.
We can actually move forward. Back to you, Emily.
No, I think it's important to highlight from my own personal work in conflict zones that, again, I think people who haven't maybe been exposed to what it's like to work in those areas have a perception that when you're in these places, you're literally like in the middle of a battle 24/7, right? And thankfully, that's not the case, right? I mean, it's still incredibly dangerous, and there's such tremendous negative impact to people's lives, but people still wake up every day. They try to send their kids to school. They try to go to work. They try to create some semblance of normalcy. They try to go and, tend to their fields and do what they can to provide for their families and their children, right? And that's where I think what's so special about what we can do together is there is a network on the ground, and there's already this vetted, structured mechanism, right, where folks that want to participate can come in through what we're talking about today, is the Bedrock Alliance. If you would like to contribute in one of 3 ways, you can do that through CIMMYT. And it's already been structured, and the infrastructure has been essentially paid for and put together with USAID for your individual or corporate contributions to go directly to what CIMMYT and their partners are doing on the ground, right? So it's going directly to plant more crops, feed more people, generate more water for those communities, anything that you would like to contribute. I'm going to throw the link in the LinkedIn chat again. What we're asking you to do today is sign up through this link for what we're calling the Bedrock Alliance. And there are 3 different ways that we believe folks in our community, which I'm certainly speaking to all my friends and colleagues in the mining industry and the larger geoscience community, right? Because there's a lot that can be done if you're not in mining, but you're a geoscientist of some kind, but also just of our friends and colleagues from around the world who may not be tied in any way to that industry, but still want to help. Certainly financial contributions are always appreciated, right? And we've talked, Loren's expecting a $10 million pledge coming out of this one LinkedIn webinar. That's what we're aiming for. So if you've got that many zeros, please definitely sign up at the form. But also I would encourage you to think about what you or your team or your friends can do through in-kind donations. And that might be physical stuff. It might be fertilizer, it might be solar panels, it might be batteries for storage of power, which is something we've also talked about, but it also might be time, right? Maybe you've got the ability to do some work on the data side to help us figure out where the next well should be drilled. Maybe you can help in some way to monitor for environmental impact and what that means for crops and what's going on, right? We as a community have such a phenomenal scientific skill set that really can be brought to bear for this problem set. Maybe your mining company has a huge logistics capability where you've got something of value to add on that front, right? There may be all sorts of things that you do where you can contribute through an in-kind donation of time or goods. And then the third way that you can contribute is we're going to be working together on a citizen scientist initiative, right? To identify ways that through collaborative science, we can have anybody anywhere in the world help out and then also be connected in with the local communities that are being impacted, right? So my favorite like citizen science initiatives out there are always like fun ones like, all right, log on to count penguins in imagery, right, of the poles and like what's going on with the penguin population. My daughter loves that one. But there are all sorts of ways that you, even if you're not a scientist, can become a citizen scientist and contribute to this effort, because it's one of the things I'm super passionate about, that science really can help solve these problems, right? And there are lots of ways for people to be involved in science initiatives as an individual or as a team or a group, however you would like to organize. And I think Jess just put that in the chat for me. So anybody, if you click on that link, you can put your information in and indicate which of those ways you'd like to help, which of you would like to write that $10 million check for Loren. But again, that's the ask, is for you to also contribute in thinking about how can we as a community bring all of our skills and knowledge to bear on this immediate crisis, because you all are super smart people with a lot of experience, and you're probably going to think of stuff that we haven't. So Loren or Bram, do either of you, Loren, want to chime in?
Jump in. I'll make my pitch again and say that we've put a lot of money in with CIMMYT into all these partnerships. And one of the challenges they have right now is to develop a winter planting program. So they're looking to figure out what can they plant in December, January, February, that's going to be valuable as we get through this season, things like vegetables and potatoes and some other kinds of things. And so one of the things I've challenged Bram a little bit to say is we're going to make this investment with CIMMYT. Can you find matching funds? Can you find matching funds from private donors or public donors or other European donors to help make this planting season twice as large? We've gotten a certain number of resources that we've supplied, and several millions of dollars to CIMMYT, and they're looking essentially to leverage that up. And so, because we want to double the amount of planting, they recently just finished a fantastic planting scheme of sorghum and millet and also groundnuts, peanuts, which are a major source. Peanut butter is very popular in Sudan, by the way. I happen to love peanut butter. And for those that love peanut butter, it's a big deal. It's part of the basic nutrition basket in Sudan, which I find sort of fun. But anyway, we need to plant more peanuts because it's a major food source there. So that's kind of the immediate challenge. And if folks are willing to jump in with CIMMYT, what's amazing about this to me is that you're building on a legacy of the Green Revolution. You're building on a legacy of what Norman Borlaug and these early scientists in agricultural development worked on. And as we leverage with CIMMYT, we're basically it's a way to expand on what the U.S. government's already paid for. It's an interesting thing, Emily. I'll just say this: you can pay taxes, and I encourage you all to pay taxes. Everyone should pay their taxes. That's a good thing to do. Would never say otherwise, of course. Everyone should pay their taxes, and then part of those tax dollars get cycled through and eventually become dollars for USAID to invest in places like Sudan. You can also, in some cases, with a 501c3, write tax deductible donations to CIMMYT, and then it's going directly into the programs, and it doesn't actually have to come through the bureaucracy of the U.S. government. Not that I would advocate that, but I'm just saying there's an interesting way to leverage your donations versus what you've already donated or paid as far as your tax bill. So I just wanted to say that we're working in Sudan. We're going to do our best. We're going to work hard on it. But if you can also make a contribution, especially for this winter planting season, it would be huge, and the Sudanese would remember it. So there's a very specific, unique opportunity that we need to get done, essentially planning for December.
Yeah. And I would say, Loren, and Bram, this is what I know it's a little jargony, but at least we used to call it catalytic funding, right? Because the infrastructure is already there. There are already existing programs. Your money doesn't even just double, but it's like a catalytic impact on what's being done. Bram, I wonder if you could speak to that, how this is more of an exponential impact if folks join in.
No, absolutely. And first and foremost, I wish to thank USAID and the American people through Feed the Future for already making this possible. And what that did was basically the intellectual and the physical and the human infrastructure or network is on the ground. And that has helped us to plant right now crops that will be harvested in a couple of months and will go to the market. The challenge we have right now is what's next. We need to get ready to, after that, actually plant crops in the winter season, because it's no longer enough to just plant crops in the summer season. We really need to continuously set up a continuous flow of food crop and food supply in Sudan. So as Loren was saying, that is the challenge now. The resources available from USAID will bring us through the past cycle and be able to harvest. We just planted. We now need to get ready for that winter cycle. And basically the plan is it's very concrete. It's in 3 states, in Kassala, Northern and River Nile. There's serious, and those are selected states for security concerns, but also for the need to plant there. And so the focus will be now to how do we get plants crops into the ground for the October-March season. We will be working with farmer groups and associations that are already formed. So the investments already made helped us to set up farmer groups and associations, cooperatives, and bring in private sector actors. And now we really want to set up those pivot irrigation systems in River Nile and northern states that are currently not used. And so those facilities could actually open up the potential to plant potato, faba bean, and sunflower. And we would also like to have some vegetables and onions into those schemes. So we're developing the model in order to get those schemes going, and that will include big farmers, medium and small farmers. Smallholder farmers are clustered within providing groups, and also will bring in the private sector so that they can do services and input delivery. And we are connecting to UNDP's efforts that, as they are trying to solarize several of the energy points. So we are definitely connecting to that. And the idea is to also have a vibrant local companies that can be empowered, so that we are already preparing for that next step, because we hope, of course, peace will come very soon, and that we can then activate again the economic tissue. So we want that local entrepreneurship also to connect it to our efforts.
And I'll just add that, Emily, I'm glad to meet with any, especially corporate partners that want to work with aid. Sometimes we sign MOUs, memorandums of understanding. Sometimes there's a high level engagement. And if companies are willing to support us in Sudan, that's a big deal for the U.S. government. And it's a big deal that we would happily collaborate on in different ways. By the way, the port's open. Port Sudan is functioning. The recent seed and fertilizer input program that CIMMYT implemented, came through the port. So it's not all bad. Afghanistan never had a port that we could work with. So Sudan has that one advantage. There's a port that we can get things in and out of. There's a relationship north with Egypt. There's also, and about 2 million people have already fled to Chad, to Egypt, and others. We don't want to see the rest of them flee. And there are other efforts to try to calm down the fighting and work towards a ceasefire. But right now we're focused on the immediate, how do we get people fed and water. Now, the other thing too is that solarization is such an important thing. We need to solarize healthcare, solarize water points, solarize agriculture. It's just kind of a big focus. Diesel prices are through the roof right now, and it's just hard to get with the conflicting sides. So I think it's just, there's an interesting argument in solar. People talk about, is solar a good idea? Well, when you have no choice, solar becomes a great idea.
It's a great option when it's the only option. Yeah.
Right. This is just, sometimes I know in different markets and developed markets, is solar really the option? Well, right now it's all we got. And so I think that's, can you run a center pivot system off of solar? Well, you can. It's not often done. It's often done off of diesel generators, but we have solar center pivot systems in the north. And the question is, can you run those off of solar? Well, you can, and we have plenty of sun. And it's kind of forcing that change in some ways. This is, diesel's not available in many of these places. So we're going to have to do something different. So it's forcing that change, which is a good change. It's just, it's sad that it's a conflict that's pushing us in that direction, but it's a good change.
No, I just wanted to add that it's actually about no regret investments,
Mm-hmm.
right? So of course we want the conflict to be resolved very soon, but any of these investments are no regret investments. If that happens, it will empower the country even more. Then those investments will be the start of peaceful development. So just wanted to make that clear.
No, I was just going to make a mention because I can see some of the folks that have joined us live on LinkedIn are in like the ESG CSR space within the mining industry. And I would make sure that everybody knows while there is an urgent need right now, right, to help, this is also something that is going to be going on for a while. So if you're part of the team at your company that is planning for the next year or 2 years for what you're going to do from a charitable or humanitarian perspective, ESG, CSR programs, like this is something that we can continue to have conversations about, as Loren referenced, for the long term. So maybe you've already made commitments for this year. You've gone through your budget for causes that you can donate to or support. Well, then let's have a conversation about next year, right? Yeah. And the year after. And I think what's really cool about this is a lot of times companies don't know that they can partner with the US government and donor agencies and groups like CIMMYT, right? You don't have to go do something from scratch, right? There are folks already doing this on the ground that, again, your tax or Americans' tax dollars have already paid for, other donor agencies have contributed to. So there's stuff that's already built that your money can go to, again, be catalytic in that sense. But you don't have to do something right now. If you can't do something right now, please don't let that stop you from reaching out and having a conversation about what you might be able to do in the future.
And just on that point, there are many conflicts in the world right now. You might want to get involved in one or not. Maybe you want to avoid them all. But the reality is this is the biggest food security crisis on the planet. This is the biggest one in terms of numbers. It's 10 times bigger than other conflicts. You may have heard more about it and others. But you can get involved, and I think people need to get involved. And there is a long-term future for mining in Sudan. There's no question about in my mind that this is the future of Sudan in terms of economic growth will end up being mining. So I think it's kind of an interesting opportunity. I've worked on public-private partnerships in other parts of the world on different topics many times, done some of the biggest public-private partnerships with USAID history with, tens of millions of dollars from USAID leveraging maybe more than that from the private sector. So it's something we know how to do. There's a mechanisms for there. There's a way to do it. We're glad to speak at different levels at the corporate level, and we can connect people with different levels of the U.S. government level. So I think there's different ways of working through that. We are in an interesting season right now, which I won't talk about in terms of the U.S. government. But having said that,
what is something happening? I haven't been following the news.
But having said that, Sudan matters. It's big. It's going to matter for a long time. And how do I say this? There's the terrible images of starvation are coming. That's coming to your news screens. People are going to see this on CBS and CNN. All the news screens are going to see this over the next several months. So it's sort of one of those things that I want to say get on the ground floor, but this is a big crisis. It's a massive crisis. It's going to get worse. And we're going to do everything we can. And with everything we can do, it won't be enough. And so I think to some degree, from an ESG point of view, let's get involved in this crisis early on. Let's try to head off as much of this as we can. Let's try to reduce it as it rolls through. And then when peace comes, we'll be in a much better position to be involved in this country. Sudan a couple of years ago was a flowering democracy. There was a revolution. Yeah. We'd switched out. People were very excited about it. And there's still a future there. There's a great youth group. The youth bulge in Sudan is massive, and they're very hopeful for a better future. And I think, they're watching what's happening right now. But it really is, again, if I'm running ESG programs or compliance programs, why Sudan? Why? Well, if I'm interested in East Africa, if I'm interested in the Middle East, next to the Red Sea, next to Suez. There's a lot of reasons to be interested in this part of the world. And as a human, it's the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet.
And I think, we spend a lot of time at Prospector and our podcast On the Rocks talking about why is there a certain perception of the mining industry as being incredibly self-interested. Right? We only get involved with communities when we need a permit. We only address environmental issues when we're about to lose a permit, right? Like that's the perception that's out there. And I go to all of these mining conferences and I have all these conversations where it's the same talk about, well, we need to communicate better the value we bring to the world. If people only understood how important we were to putting food into the world, into building infrastructure out of the materials that we mine. If people only understood that, right, then they would love us more. Well, here's an opportunity as an industry to do this because it's the right thing to do. There is no direct self-interest, right, from an existing kind of like investment perspective for anybody. So let's show everybody, here's why we're part of this global community, right? We mine things because we understand as the industry how important this material is to making sure that people can feed their children, to making sure that people can have water to drink and water their crops and, you know, their animals, right? Like, we understand the value of what we do, and as such, we're going to give it as a gift, right, to help with this crisis. It's a unique opportunity for folks in the industry to have people see us as different because we're doing something different, right? Let's try something that we haven't done before.
Yeah, Emily, I appreciate the invitation so much. And I'll just go back. Dr. Govaerts is this organization, CIMMYT. This is a multi-decade initiative to feed the world. This was not a 1 or 2 or 3 year effort. This is multi-decade. And so in the ag research world, they understand the investment over long periods of time. This is kind of what they do. Now, we see the world shifting from gas-based cars to battery-based cars. Well, that's going to mean a shift from maybe the Middle East to Africa and South America and South Asia, where those minerals are coming from. Well, as you do make that shift, dealing with the communities and the conflicts that may be in those communities is becoming a bigger deal. So I think in some ways the mining industry will learn how to make these multi-decade investments along with their technology customers. There are critical minerals in Sudan. There are critical minerals, uranium. There's a lot of things in Sudan that could be mined, fertilizer and other kinds of things. So this is kind of one of those cases, Emily, I think it's a fantastic test case to say, do we want to get involved with a country that long-term has tremendous mining potential and right now is in the middle of a terrible conflict, the worst humanitarian conflict in the world? Would we want to get involved? But I think, you know, Bram, you can talk a little bit about, this is a multi-decade effort. I mean, your work in Sudan started in the 80s, maybe earlier, correct. 70s. So, right.
Yeah, correct. And that's what it's about. There's a crisis, but we are responding to a multi-decade effort to feed the world, right? So there was a first population growth globally, and that was what the Green Revolution responded to. New varieties globally, increased productivity. Now we're looking at climate change and resilience overall. And I think there's huge potential in Sudan, but this is also a test case to say within such a crisis, can you actually, while the crisis is already happening, we're actually thinking about no regret investments that will be very, very instrumental to respond to the crisis, but also to the development later on. And it taps into CIMMYT's continuous multi-decade effort of producing and generating better seeds. So basically, and don't want to get too technical, but we have a big bunker in Mexico where we safeguard biodiversity for humanity, 28,000 different maize accessions and 150,000 different wheat accessions. So that's biodiversity, that's building blocks with which we then generate new seed. Like you, when I explain it to farmers, it's like you take a very, very handsome man and a very, very smart woman, and you want handsome and smart kids. So we do the same with those seeds. So you may have heard about the big seed bank in Norway that is actually a copy of what CIMMYT safeguards for maize and wheat. But it's not just locked away. We really look at, in that biodiversity, what is relevant for Sudan. Because imagine if on top of this you have a disease coming in that is wiping out the production. So we're monitoring the diseases in Sudan. We're looking at making sure that those seeds, when handed out, and that's maybe also very important, we're working with those NGOs. So because it's not the same if it's seed from Iowa corn or Sudan corn, right? So also making sure that our partners can do a better job by having the right information and that the distribution of those seed varieties also already have the inherent resistance for the future. For example, what this network is doing on wheat and is doing on sorghum, we're looking at drought-resistant wheat and drought-resistant groundnuts. And so in order to actually already also build in future shocks that will come from climate change.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is CIMMYT's foundation, started with Rockefeller, which if you think about was a private, where did that come from? We know where they got their funding. And so it's sort of interesting to think about it. And then if you go visit their fantastic campus where these seed banks are which backed up the Sudanese seed banks, you see buildings that were donated by certain Mr. Gates and maybe a Mr. Slim and some other kinds of things. So there are wealthy donations that have actually contributed to this multi-decade effort to make sure the world can feed itself. And I think, again, Sudan is a microcosm of that challenge. Can we feed ourselves going forward? And sometimes we want to say we want to work when there's no conflict. We want to wait till there's no conflict. Well, unfortunately, conflict tends to pop up all over the world. And so it's just kind of a reality, and it's been part of my career reality, that we're in the middle of conflict and we got to get something done anyway. People got to eat. We got to find a way to get forward. I'll never forget setting up chicken coops in the middle of southern Afghanistan in Helmand, of all places, and flying in chicks and things from Georgia. And despite the challenges and despite what's gone on there, those chicken coops are still producing chicken in southern Afghanistan. And so it's one of those kinds of things where you say, well, we've got to move forward. We've got to move forward. Conflict is reality. It's reality. But we also have to figure out ways to move forward and help people feed themselves.
And I think that kind of time dimension is actually something that makes this type of collaboration and partnership so well suited for the mining industry, because all of us working in the industry know, the average mine takes like 15 years to bring into development from a discovery. So all of us that are working to go out and do exploration, build mines, operate mines, we're there for the long haul, right? So let's partner with and support initiatives that are also there for that long-term resilience of the communities and these initiatives, right? We are not an industry that does things poof overnight, right? Despite what I like to call the people that expect a magical lithium fairy to land, right? With a magical lithium supply for battery tech. That doesn't happen, we all know. So it's a great way to partner with agencies and groups that are doing long-term work that supports your long-term initiatives in these locations.
Well, Bram, and ironically, the major funder of conflict in Sudan happens to be mining.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the irony of the thing. And I think, I've seen estimates of 1,000 tons of proven gold reserves. It's sort of, what's available there. There's a lot of gold there. And that's part of what's motivating the mining. So you think if there was a way, we know about blood diamonds and the Kimberley process, I know there's a set of practices on gold that came out of the OECD as well in terms of gold and how it's managed and things like this. I just think that, gold needs to go to the right places and it needs to go to the right buyers. You need to know where that transparency comes from, right? You need to know where it comes and goes. I think that's kind of the challenge thing for Sudan too, is I don't think most Sudanese gold is going to the right places. The official estimates are a certain number. They think the real estimates are 3 times that number. So again, it's a bit of an irony there that the gold is fueling the conflict, and yet we're talking to mining companies, Western mining companies, to say, would you consider investing in the solution, in the humanitarian solution?
But there's a gap, right? And what we would all consider quote unquote legitimate companies won't go and operate in a jurisdiction because of geopolitical risk, physical risk, also legal regulatory risk. Mining is extremely risk mitigation focused. So if the reputable actors won't go into a place like Sudan, it creates a vacuum where people have mined gold for a long, long time. They're going to figure out how to do it. So I agree, Loren, it's also an opportunity through a different mechanism, not going in and investing in gold exploration or mining, but building some relationships, better understanding the situation on the ground so that when conditions are appropriate, maybe there's a way to move in and, kind of fill that void with more legitimate actors.
I'll give you an example. CRS is one of our partners. Catholic Relief Services is a partner with CIMMYT and others, and they do amazing work in Sudan. And they're working right now, despite the conflict. They're in some of the areas controlled by the militia. And I'll just mention this. That's an example of they don't leave. It's sort of interesting. A lot of investment people leave. Save the Children doesn't leave. Mercy Corps doesn't leave. They work around the fighting. It's sort of unbelievable. It's scary how they do what they do. And I'll give you one example. It was interesting to me in Helmand or in Afghanistan. We were working with CRS similarly, and when Pope John Paul II died, the Afghan neighbors all brought CRS gifts, and it was one of those moments when there was no proselyting. They weren't religious in their work, but everybody knew, and they knew about the help that they got. And when there was a major shift in leadership, the neighborhood responded. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think. That happens in Afghanistan. It happens in places like Sudan. When you help people that really need help, and you don't need to help them, you don't have to. There's nothing obligating you to. There's no self-interest. Boy, everybody remembers that for a long, long time.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
just to complement this, it's that long-term perspective, but it's also CIMMYT's neutral and catalytic perspective, right? In the sense that if you're in conflict, you still need seeds for wheat, corn to plant, and it still needs to be seeds that are not devastated by diseases out there. So on the one hand, on the other hand, we are working with the Sudanese, like we did with Syria, for example, to safeguard their biodiversity in our gene bank, so that when the conflict is over, we can actually send that biodiversity back, because we don't realize, but biodiversity is also destroyed in the conflict. So we're safeguarding some of that. And CIMMYT continues to work wherever there are conflicts. We continue to distribute those seeds and working with the local research organizations and local organizations. So I think that combination that we have right now with CRS, Mercy Corp, and others, but also the knowledge partners, is really a very powerful. And it's a bit of it's also a setup that we're monitoring. There's a clear monitoring and evaluation dashboards. There's clear accountability, but also the setup per se is a learning space that I think is going to give a lot of insights for other conflict areas later on to set up very similar networks.
I want to make a shout out for cold storage, by the way, Emily. This is an issue that we always need, is cold storage.
Yeah.
Health programs depend on it. Food programs depend on it. And vaccine programs. One of CIMMYT's big success stories recently was vaccinating about 5 million animals. And it's sort of amazing how many animals were vaccinated. It's an army of vet techs. We love veterinarians. Veterinarians go places that nobody else can go. Everybody loves vets. And vet workers. It's sort of amazing. People love their animals. They depend on their animals. That's where you go, in these markets when you're in trouble. And so anything related to animal health is very welcome. We're always interested in supporting the vets and vet techs, and that was a big plus for us in Afghanistan as well. But it's been huge for us in Sudan. And just a shout out to the vets, and they always say they have a harder job than doctors, because doctors deal with one kind of animal, and the vets, of course, deal with everything.
And that animal can talk. You can tell them.
So, major shout out to our vets and vet workers.
Well, I think just to wrap up, I mean, again, huge shout out to everybody that's already involved in this crisis, the teams that both of you are working with on the ground and in the background, because I know there's also an army of people making all of this happen as well, who aren't literally there on the ground, but are putting their hearts and souls into, making a difference in this crisis. And just a reminder to folks, like all we're asking you to do today is sign up for that Bedrock Alliance and indicate how you would like to support. And I would say that while this is the crisis that kind of pulled us together to talk about this topic, the objective here would be to identify a model, right, by which the industry can come in and help participate and address issues as they come up in other areas. So I know a lot of the comments that I've seen are, again, we've got a great global participation here, folks chiming in about needs in other countries, different types of needs, educational support, right? There's a lot of different things that are needed. And I think a big part of what we need to do, at least as a mining industry and geoscience community, is just figure out who wants to help and what can they help with, right? So that we can match make folks accordingly. So do you have money? Do you have something that you could do in kind from a scientific or data perspective or physical material? Or is it your individual friends and colleagues that want to help participate from a citizen scientist aspect? Those are, again, the three that we've come up with and that we've asked you to consider saying that you're interested, but we would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. So please just go to that link and register, and we'll continue to have these conversations, and we'll of course be following up with what you can do specifically with USAID and CIMMYT in Sudan, but it won't be the last time you've heard from us.
No, and maybe just say that we're willing to work with you. Sudan may be a long ways away. These giant organizations, institutions, we're willing to work with you. I've worked with all kinds of public and private partners, hundreds over the years, and there's different ways we can work together. Mostly what you need is someone who has a bit of a commitment and an interest to kind of get involved. And with that, we start with that and then figure out where it goes. So I think, Emily, your initiative here with the Bedrock Alliance is fantastic. I've seen other kinds of alliances like these. I think this is an amazing way to go. And I think it's something that in some ways, I think the mining industry, as we move into the Green Revolution years, Green Revolution, as instead of the new Green Revolution, essentially, of green energy revolution, we're going to need this kind of collaborative effort across the board in all these countries. I mean, there's a lot of countries where mining minerals come from, and this is where CIMMYT works. So the combination of ag and mining and conflict resilient agriculture is going to be there in Sudan and lots of other countries.
And on that, CIMMYT has developed a methodology to what we call integrated agri-food systems initiatives. That is a methodology to map out what the different contributions can do with a strategic plan, with a tactical plan. We have that for Sudan, but as Loren was saying, we also have that for many other countries. And Emily, really thanks for keeping this conversation going. This is amazing how in short record time we brought together. So thanks a lot for your efforts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. And thanks everyone again for joining us. And if anybody knows folks that they think would like to hear this conversation, maybe folks within your organization or your company, this will be in a few minutes. It'll be replayable on LinkedIn. So you can just send the link to folks also if they couldn't join us live, but you know somebody that's just got to hear this conversation and that they'd be interested. Please do share it, even if that's all that you could do today. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to following up.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Loren. Thank you, Emily. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for tuning in and listening to this important conversation. To learn more about how you can get involved with the Bedrock Alliance and support efforts to address this crisis in Sudan, please visit www.prospectorportal.com/bedrock-alliance-Sudan. Together, we can make a difference. And don't forget to follow Prospector on social media to stay up to date on further initiatives, industry data, mining news, and more. Join our community and be a part of the conversation shaping the future of responsible mining.